Introduction to Deaf People. Hello and welcome. Thank you for coming to my presentation. First of all, I want to ask the interpreter not to interpret this part. Go ahead, interpreter, please continue. I know some of you have been sitting there for a few moments thinking, how come the interpreter is not saying anything? Do you know who the interpreter is here for? The interpreter is here for you as well, because you don't understand sign. You think the interpreter is for me also? It's actually for both of us, because if you ask me a question, the interpreter will assign an ASL, and then I can understand. So I want to emphasize that the interpreter is here for the both of us. I have a few topics I want to discuss. I have a Q&A question as well. There is no right or wrong answer. We are here to learn. And I want you just to absorb the information here. We're just going to take a few topics and touch on it lightly. And perhaps when you go into the real outside out of this classroom, you can pick it up more. If you have any questions, please ask me at any time. It's important for all of you to answer your questions quickly. Please don't leave here without asking your questions. That's what I'm here for. Please ask the questions. Just remember those two rules. So while I'm lecturing, please just raise your hands and ask the question. What is the word that best describes a person that cannot hear? The first word is deaf. Second word is hard of hearing. Third word is hearing impaired. Another definition would be physically disabled. A fifth term would be, I don't know. How many think of the answer is deaf? Okay, a few of you, around 10 people said A. How many people you think the right is hard of hearing? A lot of you said that, okay. And the third one, how many people picked hearing impaired? Or maybe 3 of you, okay, go ahead. Physically handicapped. How many think that would be the right answer? None. All right. The fifth one, you just don't know the answer. How many of you think that? Okay, great. Really, the best answer is A, deaf. Deaf is a word is clearly used in deaf culture, and it's used in ASL, American Sign Language. You can use the word deaf because that's who we are. We are deaf, and we are not against that word. There's a large deaf community composed of deaf, hard of hearing, and latent deaf. I'm going to talk about the first one, about hearing lost. The next one is really deaf. 1,000 are profoundly deaf. I'll break it down later. Does anybody think there's one universal sign language? What is it, true or false? How many think it's true? How many answered false? Okay, all right, all of you really think it's false. Great. All of you are right. America has its own language, and we call it American Sign Language, which has gestures, its own sentences. The interpreter actually must practice and learn sign language so that she can interpret properly, to interpret American Sign Language to English and English to American Sign Language. One example of ASL water running. Run. Run. There's different meanings of run. The interpreter actually has to have a lag time to figure out what the context is for the word run. Another question is, how many feel that deaf people can read lips? True or false? How many answered true? Okay. How many answered false? Okay, about 9 or 10 of you said false. Research says that 35% hearing people can assume. Yes. Yes. Guess what word that one was? Test. And this one was 10. Everybody said yet. Test or 10? So which one is it? Or sex? People think it's sex? Okay. 6. Actually, the first one was 6, and the other one was sex. So imagine that. Imagine deaf people trying to read lips. You can't figure out some of those words. It's just assuming, and it's just unclear. So a lot of deaf people assume that we can read lips, but it's really hard to do that. So we assume when we misread lip reading. So I try not to do that. Can anyone copy sign in interpreting? True or false? How many people said true? One person said true. How many said false? Half of you, maybe 10 of you, and then said false. Half of you weren't sure. Well, the answer is no, it is false. Can we copy sign? No, because you can't copy sign because it's actually a language you need to study. Linguistics, you need to be involved in deaf culture, you need to read body language, non-manual signals. You can't just copy sign. It's actually its own language. And interpreting also.